All right, folks, we are back for part two. So this part is going to be the coding application of our bubble sort. So the first thing that I want to do is I want to put together a couple blocks of code. So to make this work. So let's go into my block section. So the first thing I'm going to do, just like anything when we're creating code, 9 times out of 10 or more like 10 times out of 10, you're going to be using variables. So let's work on initializing some of the variables that we're going to be needing here. We're going to be using 2 global variables, and then there'll be 1 local variable that we'll be using. So I'm going to go to my variables here, and let me grab my initialize global. All right, and I'm just going to copy this again because I'll need 2 of them. All right, and so the first one that I need is I'm just going to generically call list. All right, because what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be storing, I'm going to be creating a list, and then I'm going to be storing the random numbers within this list here. And then the next one here is name 2, so I'm going to swap that out, and I'm going to call this one temp. And I'll explain in a second why we are going to be using that. So for the initialize global list, what I want to do is I'm going to click on list here, and I want to grab this create empty list. Because, again, remember when we used the list feature previously, we used the make a list, and we use this one because this already has inputs, which means we can either hard code or have like a variable pass in data into this. But what I want to do is I want to create random numbers. So what I'm going to do is in a procedure that I create, I'm going to generate a list that is going to have those random numbers passed in. So I'm creating an empty list right now as sort of like a placeholder, and then what eventually is going to happen is those random numbers will then pre-fill or populate into this empty list to however many elements that I want to pass in. And then the next thing we have are global temps. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to set this to a 0 for now. And then we're going to be using this temp variable in order to swap numbers in and out of. So that being said, what we now need to do is I'm going to create my my random number generation. All right, and so for that, I'm going to make a procedure. It's always good to build procedures and to place our code within that. So for this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my variable, and I want to grab the set feature here, and let's plug that in. And what I want to do is I want to set my global list, because this is where I want to populate my list from all the random numbers that I put together. And then I'm going to come over here, and I'm going to click on my list, and I want to grab a make a list and plug that in. And then what I'm going to do is I want to have a total of 5 numbers. So, I mean, you can do 4, you can do 6, you can do 20. I mean, it's up to you. But I'm just going to run with 5 numbers. All right, so what we are going to do is we're going to grab so from here, like I said, we want to randomize the numbers that we are going to be putting into this list. So we don't want to have it consistent. We want it to be completely random. So in my app inventor, what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab this random integer block, and I'm going to plug this into here. And I'm going to click on control, and I'm going to duplicate this 4 other times. So I plug these in here. Now, if you want to really, make it, random, you can increase, instead of having 1 to 100, you can have it like 1 to 10,000, 1 to 1,000,000, 1 to 10. Consistently, you can have this one a 1 to 1,000, this one 1 to 10, this one 1 to 50, this one 1 to 500. I mean, it's up to you, but for the sake of keeping it simple, I'm just going to have all 5 blocks be 1 to 100. And then what I want to do is I now want to populate these random numbers into my list viewer. So I'm going to go under my list view here, and just like we did with the list picker, how we had to use the elements option, because the elements are the items that are specifically built into or that are passed into that list. All right, so we have this over here, list view 1.elements. So I want to grab this, and I want to plug that right into the bottom of this global list block here. All right, and what we want to do is we want to going to mouse over this list, and I want to grab this get global list, and then I want to plug that in here. Because all these random items are going to be passed into this list, which is going to be stored within this variable list. And now what I want to do is I want to call this variable list and then populate those numbers in the elements within that list view. All right, so that will take care of this piece right here. So every single time that, when I keep working on the code, when I click on the random button random, then that will execute. When I call this procedure, that will execute making a random set of numbers and then populating the list. So it should generate random numbers, new random numbers every time. So with that being in mind, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to click on button random, and I want to grab the when button random.click. And all I have to do for this now, instead of writing this code all over again, I'm just going to go into my procedures here, and I want to click on this call procedure and plug it in. So, and that's just something I probably should have done before I even did that, is change the name of this. So rather have it generic be call procedure, I'll just call this generate random as my function, my procedure I should say, and it automatically changes it here for us as well. What I also want to do is that when this program loads, I want to make sure that numbers are already populated into this list view, so that I won't run into any issues where because as of right now, there's no numbers that are being populated into my list. And if I click on sort, well then the program's not going to know what to do because there's no numbers that are going to be present within my list. So what I want to do is I'm going to click on screen 1 here, and I want to grab the screen1.initialize feature. So again, remember, when we use the screen1.initialize, what that basically is telling us is the moment the program loads, we want to execute or initialize any code that is within this block right over here. So we're going to go under our procedures, and we're going to grab again that generate random, and we're going to plug that into our code here. All right, so we now, if you wanted to test this, and I'll do it all at the end, but if you want to test this when you hit the generate random button, or even when you load the program, you should see random numbers between 1 and 100 populating within our list there. All right, but what we're going to do is we now need to put together the sorting mechanism so that we understand how everything basically bubbles from the smaller numbers will basically bubble from the top. How do we get the smaller numbers so that they're sorted from the bigger numbers? And when we do that, we're using the button sort to make that happen. So I'm going to click on that, and I'm going to grab this when button sort.click event handler. Actually, you know what I'm going to do? Let me. I'm going to click on this block here, and I'm going to collapse block. So it's basically shrinks it down. So that's just the random number, so we don't need to really see that. And that just gives me a lot more space to now work with this block, because this is going to get a little bit big. All right. So the first thing I need to do is I have to, just like you saw in the notes that I covered from the previous video, we have 2 loops in this program that is going to ultimately determine, one, we're using a loop to compare one card with the next, and then we're using the next loop to basically keep sorting through or repeating through the process, because we're always making sure that we're comparing 2 cards and then sorting them so we have the highest in our hand, the lowest one face down, and then the next 2, and then the next 2, and then the next 2, or the current 2, I should say. But we have to loop through the process n number of times until everything is met. So in order to do that, what we're going to do is we're going to start with our button sort here, and I want to grab and I want to create the first outer loop. So I'm going to grab this for each loop right here, and we're going to plug this in. All right, so what we're going to do for this is we're always going to start from index 1, because that's always the first item within the counting, the numbers, the list, whatever it is that we're working with. But for the 2, what we're going to do, we're going to get rid of that, and we need to basically use more code variable based, if you will, that will make it easier so that if we increase or decrease the amount of items we have in our list, it's going to scale appropriately. So with that being said, what I need to do for this is I'm going to go into my math tab, I'm going to grab my minus block, and I'm going to plug this in. All right, and then for this, what I'm going to do, because in here, let me go back and open this again. Because I'm using a list, all right, what I want to do is I want to grab the length of this list, because that's what I ultimately want to check on. I want to check how many inputs do I have in here, and I want to base my incrementer of how far I go up off of the value of this list, or how many items I have in here. All right, so with that being said, what we're going to do is we're going to go under our list, and if you remember, we used this before, there is a length of list block over here, and that it does the counting for us. So we're going to plug that in, and we're going to do length of list, and again, remember the list is just the name list, so we're going to grab this variable and we're going to plug this in. And we're going to use the minus button, and we're going to use -1. And again, whenever we're doing any sort of sorting within a list, we're always looking for, it's always going to count from n, or from 1 to n-1, because that will then put us at the comparison of the very last item that is within our list, and then we can then repeat and loop the process if need be. And then we're always going to increment by 1, which means we're not going to want to skip over everything, because that would not be a good thing. So this outer loop is going to allow us to go through the process multiple times. All right, what I now need to do is I now need to build code that is going to look specifically, the loop that's going to compare the two cards in question to determine if one card is greater or less than the other, depending on if I want to sort it ascending or in descending fashion. So what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to nest a loop in here, just like we saw in the pseudocode. And let me actually just do that. Let me go back into the bubble sort here. As you can see over here, we have two loops. We have two repeats over here. These are loops. So again, we have one loop, and then we have another loop nested inside this outer loop. And then the purpose of this inner loop is to compare those cards in question. All right, so that's kind of what we are going to put together now. So I'm going to go back under my control, and I'm going to grab another for each loop. Right, and I'm going to plug that into my inside my loop over here. All right, so now this is where I have to, again, just like I did previously up here, there's nothing different that I'm doing in this loop compared to this loop, because again, the process is I'm comparing two cards, and then I'm looping through the process. So we're going to be using the same cards or the same numbers, and then we're going to always be counting to the n-1 value. So all I need to do is I need to just copy and paste this math block here and plug it into this inner loop over here. Same process that we're looking at. So what I now need to do is I need to create that if statement, so that if one card or if one number is less than another number, then what I want to do is I want to then arrange the number within my loop, or I'm sorry, within my list, and then I want to then obviously continue on and compare the next two, find out which one is the less than, and then place it accordingly, and so on and so forth. So for this, I'm just going to need an if statement. I'm not doing an if-else statement. So I'm going to grab the if-then block up top here, and I'm going to plug it into the inner loop that we have here. All right, so now, like I said, again, depending on if you want to do ascending or descending, it matters if you're going to be doing greater than or less than. So it's up to you how you want to do it. I'm just going to do grab a less than for my comparison. All right, and so now what I have to do is I want to select the specific item in my list, and I want to compare is the first item, or I should say, just envision if you pick up like the two cards. We're going to compare, is the second card that I pick up, is it less than the first card that I have in my hand? All right, and then if it is, what we want to do is we want to select that item from the list, and then we want to replace it, all right? And then we want to then compare again, and then we want to, replace and compare. So the way how this is going to work in this is we're going to have to go into our lists, and we're going to choose our select item from list, and we're going to plug that into this first input right here. All right, and so what we're going to do is we're going to go, well, what are we comparing? Which list? Well, it's the numbers that we have in our global list up here. So we're going to get global list, which again is located, those random numbers that are located within my procedure block right over here. So that is the list that I'm dealing with, and then the index is going to be the current index that I'm at plus 1, because again, we're now comparing the next card with the previous card. So we're going to we're going to grab, so this is where this local variable comes into play now, because this number right here is going to be the number that is coming from our list information. All right, and so we're going to be comparing the numbers that have been fed into our list view, and that's why we're going to be using this global number local variable here. So again, it's the whole point behind using the local variable is that it's saving us space so that we don't have to allocate it and therefore increase the amount of memory that we have. So we're going to grab that get number, and we're going to plug it into there, and then this is going to be get number plus 1, because that's going to be the next digit that I am dealing with. And we're going to check to see if this value is less than, same thing, select item from list. And we're going to do, again, same thing. Global list is the list that we're dealing with, so I'm just going to duplicate this value here. And then the index in question is just going to be the original, I should say the current number in question, which is just going to be this get number variable. That's going to plug into there. All right, so that is going to compare, the current index where we're at, whether if the current index is the first number, the second number, the third number, the fourth, or the fifth. We're always going to be comparing that second number with the previous number, or the card that I have in my hand, if you will. All right, so when this criteria is met, what are we going to do? Well, this is now where we have to add something, a new system in here, because if I just basically go through and start replacing information, what's going to happen is it's just going to overwrite the items in our list, and we're going to lose the original information, and that's not a good thing. So I'm going to do this really quick to kind of explain. And think of it this way. If I have three numbers, a 3, a 1, and a 2, all right, and I want to use bubble sort, and I want to get it so that's in ascending order, so we start with the lowest digit and we bubble up to the highest digit. Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to compare the first two numbers here, the 3 and the 1. All right, and because I want to push the lower numbers to the left, what I want to do is if the second number, all right, is less than the first number, well, then what I want to do is I'm going to want to replace that. I want to slide it, to the left here. But I can't replace it right away, because if I replace it, I'm going to overwrite the 1 with a 3, and then the 1 is going to be gone. I'm sorry, I'm going to overwrite the 3 with a 1, and then there's going to be no more 3 left, and I can't do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a temp variable, which is why I use the temp variable up here. And I'm going to take the lower digit and I'm going to store it into the temp variable. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to replace that with, not the temp, but I'm going to replace the number in my list. I'm going to replace it with the larger digit. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to replace the original digit with the value that was stored in my temp, which is that number 1. And when we do that process, what we see is we were able to now bubble the 3 up, and we were to move the 1 all the way to the left. We then continue the process comparing these two, and again, the same thing. We're going to put the 2 in the temp so we can slide and replace the 3 over, and then we're going to slide and replace the original 3 with the 2, and therefore we have it bubbled to where it needs to be. The 3 bubbled all the way to the top, the 2 and the 1, kind of bubbled downward to where, they need to be, and just like that, we have our list of numbers sorted. So that is sort of the train of thought that we are doing when we're using that temp number there. So let's now put it into perspective here. So I'm going to go to my variables. I'm going to grab the set feature, plug it in, and this is going to be my set temp. And this is going to allow me to set the value of the number in that list into this temp variable. So again, like we did over here, we're going to grab the select item from the list. All right, and what are we going to do? Well, again, the list is the same. We only have one list. It's our global list. So click on any one of these, duplicate, and plug it in. And then the index in question, we're going to do the get number plus 1, because we're always looking to get the second number to bubble to the left. So that's what we're always comparing to, if the criteria meets, obviously. So I'm just going to, all I'm going to have to do for this is I'm just going to copy the get number plus 1 math block over here, and then take that and plug that into my index. All right, so then what I need to do is I now need to replace the leftmost digit, which would be the higher digit, and I'm going to have to replace the number that was here. So remember when we had, let's just swap these really quick. When I have the larger digit to the left, the smaller digit to the right, what I'm doing is I'm copying this digit, and actually let me do that so that maybe it make a little bit more sense. I'm copying or duplicating the number 1, and I'm placing it up here. I'm then taking the number 2, and I'm overlaying or overwriting the number 1 here. There still technically would be a number 2 here because I'm just copying it over here, and then this number 1 is going to then be copied over the number 2, and therefore giving us that 1, 2, 3 setup that we have there. All right, so there's 2 replaces that I have to do. I have to replace, I saved off the temp number. I need to replace the 1 that was here, and then I need to take that 1 and replace the number 2 that was here. So if we go under list, we have a new item now that I don't believe we used, unless you used it in one of your blocks of code, is the replace list item. So we're going to take that and we're going to plug that in next. And again, we're going to be working off the same list here. So global list, let's plug that into the top here. So the index in question, again, it's the same index because we're dealing with the same the number scheme over here. So I'm just going to duplicate this value and plug this in. And then the replacement value, well, what am I looking to replace? Well, I need to now have to be a little careful here because I have to select the specific item in the list that I want to replace. So I'm going to click on this select list item, and I want to place this into this here. And then I want to replace it with my global items, which is the list in question. And the index specifically that I want to replace it with is just the one previously, which is my get number. So I can just click on any of these get numbers and duplicate just the get number and plug that into my index. And that will replace the current value with the previous value. All right, that's why we're using the get number and not the get number plus 1. Get number plus 1 is to take the current value. The get number is just for the previous value. So that will take care of shifting the 1 up, and that will then, which is this piece here, and then this piece here would be taking the new number, replacing the previous number. So that would move the 2 from here to over here. And now what we need to do is we need to take the temp number, and we need to now overwrite the this number down here. So I'm going to go under my lists. I'm going to go and replace list item. So I now need to add another one over here. And again, the same thing. We're going to do a global items. Global list. Global list, which is the list that I have here. And that's going to plug into here for the list that I'm dealing with. The index, again, we're replacing the original number now. So I'm going to click on I'm going to duplicate the get number variable here. And I'm going to duplicate that, and then I'm going to plug that into my index over here so that I know exactly what spot that I'm in. And then the replacement, what I want to do, this is where this temp piece comes in, because I want to replace that index number with the value that I stored in the temp variable. All right, and that will take care of that piece. All right, and the last thing that I need to do, or the last thing that I should need to do, is that I need to make sure that my the elements within the list view are populating properly. So I'm going to go under my list view here, and I'm going to grab the list view elements. All right, and that's going to go right under the last for each block. Okay, because I don't need to loop through this. I just need to have it populate and sort once, not every single time. And then what I want to do is I want to make sure that I display all the information from my list, and that would be my global list here. So I just got to click on one of these and duplicate, and then plug that into my list view. And this should be enough to basically get the system working to where we need it to be. So I'm going to switch over to my App Inventor quick. Let's go to my Connect AI Companion. I'm going to scan my QR code. And it's taking forever. I don't know why. All right, here we go. So let me switch over to my camera. All right, so here is the generic list that I had generated. As you can see, it's random numbers from 1 to 100, and they're all in different order. And all I have to do is when I click sort, all right, it sorts everything from ascending all the way down to the smallest, I should say descending order. Call it what you will, ascending from low to on top to highest on the bottom. And so I go to generate again. It generates another list of random numbers. I click on sort, it sorts the numbers appropriately how it should. Generate again, random numbers, I click on sort, all right, we now have our numbers sorted. And again, there's no issues even when you have duplicate numbers here, it still will sort it appropriately as how it needs to be. All right, so that is basically bubble sort and how bubble sort is used using the list viewer within App Inventor, and how we have to use our nested for loops here. The first for loop, which is basically being used in order to compare the two numbers, with next to each other. Using, again, that temporary variable to kind of get around the fact that we don't overwrite any of the information within that list. And then the outer loop, which basically now starts from the very beginning, looping through the process over again to make sure that, this inner loop will create the first pass through of comparing the number, but we now need to go through it multiple times in order to make sure that we reach all the numbers and all the numbers get sorted appropriately. All right, so we'll stop there. So if you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, have an awesome day, folks. We'll see you in the next video. Take care.